we will sit and watch Fran's presentation, and then we'll pull our chairs around and make it a very informal discussion as opposed to our sitting up here looking like we're behind the table and you're far away. So that's kind of, I think, the procedure we'll do. I'm Paula Johnson, and Eric and I are the co-chair of this wonderful group.
I'm Eric Lupie-Beal.
Matt Garrett.
Eric Mainardi. Mark Lockwood.
Barry Avery.
Marty Schwager.
Jean Donahue-Perry.
Mark Fiorentino.
And last but not least,
Nelson Toussaint.
All right, there's their names up there on the screen for you. You have 12.
so have a seat and we'll watch the presentation, and then we will turn around and have an informal. Got Jim Loping right here.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through just some information about what is the plan of conservation and development, and then what are some of the topics we're going to talk about tonight. So this will be fairly quick, but hopefully just whet your appetite and get some juices flowing as to what we might talk about for the rest of the evening. So the plan of conservation and development is a plan that's required by the state of Connecticut. If you're going to have land use regulations, as we do, subdivision regulations, zoning regulations, you have to have a plan of conservation and development. And you're required to update it every 10 years by the state. And so that's the process. The last one was adopted in 2005, and so we've got to get this done by 2005. Sorry. It'll be tough to do. 2015. So there you go. There's lots of things that are required to be in the plan. This just goes through a little bit of a list. I won't go through it. I will put this on the website when I'm done so people can see that. The first few slides are the same ones that I had in the initial public session that we did some months back. And again, some statements and policies that are part of the plan of conservation and development. And so with the previous plan, we talked about the center, and we talked about housing at the previous public session. And so at this public session, we're going to talk about commercial and industrial development, open space and recreation, and transportation. Our plan is based on a fundamental values that we have outlined in the plan. That started out in 1993 when we wrote the first plan that I was involved with. It carried through in 2005, and again, the committee's been working on fundamental values again with this plan. So we're going to start with commercial and industrial development. And from our 10-year vision from the previous plan, we talked about the quality commercial development has grown significantly in appropriate areas, has become more varied in type and adequately serves the community, reflects the character and the makeup of the community, serves a variety of recreational uses, has grown in an attractive manner and avoided a pattern of strip development, and provides an increased number of employment opportunities for residents, and is a product of architectural review guidelines. I can go over this and talk about many of the things the Commission did to move these ideas forward in the last plan, but I won't. We probably talk about that as we get through this. These are the top 10. Go ahead.
To talk about commercial needs versus residential industrial cases.
Well, we're going to kind of use commercial and industrial interchangeably tonight, if that's okay. And I'll go through it when I see the different zones, because we have industrial zones and commercial zones. We also have mixed-use zones today that we did not have 10 years ago. And so commercial is kind of what you would envision: retail, office. And industrial would be more, industrial is like, in our case, Imperial, not Imperial, but Aero Concrete. One of our major zones is an economic development zone, and that's where Imperial Nurseries was. It's now Monrovia. So our top 10 taxpayers here probably isn't as impressive as some major areas. Connecticut Light and Power is the #1 taxpayer in town. Granby Development LLC is where it's the Stop and Shop Plaza. Bay Grape Associates That's Meadowbrook Nursing Home. So you can see the rest of these. I'm not going to read them all. But Stop and Shop actually shows up twice. They show up as the number 10, and that's because of the personal property they have. That's not the real estate. The real estate shows up as Granby Development, and that's the real estate, and then the personal property is so high at Stop and Shop, it actually shows up twice as the number 10. I'm using the word taxpayer. I think it's true because that's how the assessor has it, but it's really based on value. The people with the properties with the highest value, and that's the assessed value over to the right-hand column. And so these are our industrial and commercial zones. Granby's 26,000 acres, and the vast majority, as you can see, is residential. These darkened areas are what I'm going to call commercial and industrial, and I'll go through that a little bit now. This area is a little dark, but if you look to the top, you can see that that's Aero Concrete, the larger building there, and that portion to the right-hand side of the map, going towards the bottom, is industrially zoned. It would make up the Pierce building, and it also has the, in there starts the commercial portion, and that would be the New England Pizza Plaza, I'll call it. And then on the other side of the street is where the Granby Motel is, and some of the retail uses that exist on the western side. As you go towards the bottom of the map, you'll see State Line oil, State Line propane, and some other retail uses there. That area is about 130 acres. Most of it, it's not really developed because you can see it. Some of it is excavation that's been done from Tilcon over years, and it's used for storage for Aero Concrete. As we move south, those areas are some of the retail areas that you see along Route 10. Really not too much to speak of. And then as you get further south, that's part of the Center Commons, which again, I'm calling a commercial zone. It's really a mixed-use zone. It includes the high school properties, the cemetery, Peter Avery's cornfield. It's certainly much less retail office than it is either undeveloped or public use. That would be where the Cambridge Brew House is off in that location. And the funeral home and car dealerships and things like that. As we go further now, we're into the center, and the area around Bank Street, 189, 20. That's certainly our center and our highest, most highly developed commercial area. The area in red is the area which is the historic overlay zone where commercial uses is not permitted. But if you think of Granby, you think of commercial use, that's what most people would think of.
So if you could flip back.
Yeah.
I think it's notable when people intuitively think the center is on Bank Street. If you look at that carefully, Bank Street is about a third white.
That's true. And that's because when we adopted the center zoning, we adopted a much larger area than what people thought of the center, which was basically ended at Bank Street. Now, while that's zoned industrial, commercial, a good portion of it, certainly everything behind Geisler is residential. But there's opportunities that some of those things could change. Which might take a lot of effort, but at least the opportunity is there under the center common zone. So a little further south and to the right is pretty much the Imperial Nurseries, now known as the Monrovia property. I've got a little 125 written towards the bottom. That's what the total area of that portion south of Floydville Road is. And so a total, about 350 acres in there. But it's primarily undeveloped or developed for the uses of a nursery. To the left of that is the T1 zone, which is where the YMCA is. And that area could be developed commercially, could be developed mixed use. Currently, it really doesn't have any significant retail development except for the Pepper Mill, which is actually owned by the town and operated by the owners of the Pepper Mill business. Other than that, there's a small section in North Granby, which currently doesn't have any commercial development there. It was a flower shop at one point, but below it, Longley has her properties, and that's a very, very small area, which is really not developed for commercial, and it doesn't seem to be any real desire or interest in having it go that direction at this time. So again, the map that shows the amount of area that's zoned commercial and industrial. This map, that red line is showing where the sewer line is, and the sewer line tends to match up with a good part of the commercial industrial development. It's an area where we support our highest property values with most of the, or all of the multifamily developments in that area, like Hunt Glen, Chapel Village, the Gables, and all the rest. So it's just important to know where the sewer line is, because again, that tends to mirror where most of our commercial industrial development is, except when you go real far north, it doesn't go up to where Arrow Concrete is. So we'll go into open space and recreation. Again, for the 10-year vision, the town has preserved open space, has continued to increase, thereby preserving vistas, views, and ridge tops. The open space is expanded in accordance with the town's open space plan. Actually, is true. We have an open space plan, and Tom has met that over the last 10 years. The open space is expanded through development applications, town purchases, and other town, state, and private entities. Absolutely true. The state has been involved with preserving agricultural properties over the last 10 years. The town has made purchases. The town has acquired land through development applications. And private entities, the land trust has acquired a significant amount of open space over those 10 years. Open space is expanded using corridors, paths, and trails. Serve the town residents, preserving wildlife habitat. And then on another section, the town has quality of life has remained high with quality recreational programs and increased athletic facilities. You got to remember, this isn't just open space, it's open space and recreation. And so here's some of our open space. Aaron's Park, 44 acres. Salmon Brook Park, which is right down there, 142 acres. The new high school fields, athletic facilities. And then we have private open space and recreation, in this case the YMCA, a very significant recreational facility. Anybody know what this is? High Meadow, that's right. So you don't think of High Meadow as a recreational facility, but it certainly is. And so permanently preserved open space, over 10,000 acres. Again, the town is 26,000 acres. You put it all together like that, you kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. The vast majority there at the bottom of the screen is McLean's. Well, I can show you here, because I've broken it out. The McLean's, to the lower part on the left, that's state of Connecticut land, interstate forest and such. You can see the Holcomb Farm in the middle. All those parcels which are brown or a lighter beige, those are both land trusts via either easement, owned by, preserved by easement, or owned by actual ownership. And open space, I think Granby's identified by its open space. We enjoy our fall and our winters, which we're going into. I think we'll be seeing this soon. This is the interstate forest. And then our springs, I think, are notable in our summertime, which our open space really, I think, defines Granby. And recreation, we use our open space here for hiking purposes and riding purposes. And,
Recognize somebody.
yeah, and even hiking in the wintertime. So, you recognize something there?
Right at the very end, yeah.
Yeah. So that's open space. space and recreation, and then transportation. Go ahead.
Question for
Go
you,
ahead.
Matt. Of the 10,000 acres that you identified, how much of it is open to the public use approximately?
I would say certainly the vast majority. It's not closed off. The McLean's, I think, is all open. The state property is pretty much all open. So the Land Trust doesn't close off any of its properties. A couple of the agricultural easements, which are farm properties, would not be open to the public as such. And most of the town's lands, the parks and such, are open to the
So
public.
most, yeah.
Yeah, so the vast majority of it is. Good question. Okay, so now town roads. The town roads continue to maintain a high degree of rural character. They've been constructed and reconstructed utilizing road calming techniques to reduce speed in residential areas. They're well maintained. They've become increasingly attractive through preservation of existing streetscapes, the planting of street trees, the preservation of stone walls, and are being used by a large number of bicyclists. So,
There's a bicyclist.
so you've moved out a little bit from there. And there's a bicyclist, so I sent you my photos. That's near Holcomb Farm. And these are scenic roads. You probably recognize this as Marlboro Hill. I think one of the things that helps define our community are scenic roads. Some people do come. I see them parking at Town Hall, taking their bikes off their cars and bicycling in Granby. And we have our intersections. Some of them, I think, it's one of the things we'll concentrate on the plan is improving intersections, because we do have some intersections that perhaps are not on 90-degree angles and create some challenges. But most of our roads, I think, we're fairly happy with. They're attractive and they function well. One of the things the town has done, the zoning commission has done, is try to maintain the streetscapes of roads by not allowing the new developments to push the houses all the way to the intersection of the existing town roads, instead to push them back away from the intersections. And this is Holcomb Hill, I believe. That's Black Oak, sorry. And so, again, the first house is further back off of Simsbury Road.
Is there any budget for improving roads for bicyclists, like maybe putting a little path on the side where certain roads where it might be?
There is not a budget for that. The way that is likely to come about would be through this process, where the committee and the town adopt a plan of conservation development which specifies and recommends that move forward. It would be a way that someone can approach the selectmen to say, hey, this is what we want to do with our town roads. I think this is the place for these things, those types of ideas to start.
Okay, but you would never do it for every road too?
That's right.
You'd have to do
That's
it
right.
for select, because it's too much.
That's right. That's exactly right. So another intersection, again, that's one of the things the committee started to talk about and we'll concentrate on. I'd love to hear from anybody who has some ideas of intersections that they think need work. Like you say, this is a dirt road, but it's just a cornfield road. This is another one of our scenic roads. And that's actually it. So I didn't want to spend too much time, but just give you an idea of what we were talking about tonight and whet your appetite of what some of the things everybody want to talk about. So Paul, I'll throw it back to you.
Okay, well, we, in the front, just turn our chairs around at least so we're not on our backs to everybody. I could be informal and make questions. Ideas, we're looking for ideas and concerns. Another member. So anybody want to start off with a question or? Or a complaint? Or a complaint, oh yeah, we get those once in a while too. And I thank whoever turned off the fan.
There's actually something that you like about the town that you'd want to see the town continuing to maintain and preserve, which would be good, because all of those types of things are important in the plan. So likes, dislikes, ideas.
I think before we get going, one thing for those that are new to the process and weren't able to in the last hearing, this plan is used by both the zoning part of the Planning and Zoning Commission, it's used by the selectmen, it's used by interested parties who are looking to do something in town, whether it's a current resident or someone who wants to do, for example, something commercial. This plan is used in reference, and I know, Fran, you've mentioned many times to us that this has been brought up in various meetings and hearings, these plans. So this does have impact to the direction of the town.
Okay, yeah, so I think one of the things up Brian that's,
Why don't you give us your name so we'll...
I'm Michael Day.
Okay, Michael, thank you.
So one of the things up Brian that's a concern for us is regulation of farm stores, or like an agricultural thing. I think it's a very kind of open-ended regulation system right now. So, you know, if you're living near one, you don't know what to expect in the future. And as they grow or push for new things, they can have all sorts of events that run at all sorts of hours, and you really don't know what that's going to mean for you in a couple of years down the road. You know, if you're going to be able to sleep well in the nights, or you know what kind of traffic situations are going to go on. So I was wondering, you know, are you guys planning or discussing new rules to limit what can go on there, or looking at what other towns are doing, things like that?
That would come more in our planning and zoning arena. Here we set up our goals. Now, one of our goals could be to encourage appropriate use of farm stores so that they are in harmony with the existing neighborhood.
Yeah.
That would give you a place to begin at the next step.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
That's how that
I'm thinking
that's
about.
kind of how that would.
So you are thinking about it, looking at it, because the way I'm thinking now is there's not a lot of structure there for that. So I'm thinking that it might make things run smoother if there was something in place.
You see, that over the years, the town has lost a lot of agricultural land. And so during the 1993 and 2005 discussions of the plan of conservation development, discussion has been to preserve agriculture. Agriculture is one of the fundamental values expressed in the plan of conservation. The importance of agriculture is expressed right there in that plan. And so there has been, over the years, a lot of flexibility given to farmers to encourage them to preserve their farmland and to operate their farmland because of the importance of farmland to the people of town, at least as it's been presented to me, to the commissions, and to the previous members of the Plan of Conservation Development rewrites. So the regulations right now, as they're written, they do give a lot of flexibility to farmers to operate in a manner where they can be successful so that they won't force their land into development. And we see that we have less farms and more houses in the future. So the regulations and plans of conservation developments, which are preceding this one, certainly move in the direction, are promoting farming and saying to the farmers, you really have a lot of flexibility to do what it is you need to do to be successful. So that would be my interpretation of how the regulations are written now and previous plans of conservation and development have been written. Now, we've been having indicate that there are problems with farms, and the farms are creating problems for the residents, so that would be something the commission would want to look at.
I'm just saying a standard, I'm thinking maybe there's more standard kind of blueprints for how you can still have a place that encourages like a farming community, but has reasonable protections for people surrounding those. You know, maybe like different buffer zones if there's going to be big events there, or ways of limiting like the times of events, or you know, the type of events, because there's room for abuse here that goes beyond like, you know, just a farming community. You can call yourself a farm store or something like that, and then you can use the property for another commercial purpose, you know, kind of blur the lines and, you know, take advantage of that. So that's all I'm saying. I want to make sure that, you know, someone in the community has the ability to protect themselves or have some sense of security for the future going forward. That's it. But I do agree with you, and I think it's important to really help people out if they need help here. 'Cause
I think it's finding a balance, and I think
yeah.
so far the town's been pretty good about finding that balance.
Yeah.
And we need to continue to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, well, that same concept really applies to any residential area. I think everybody I've ever interfaced with always, if there's something happening next door, they're worried about the impact to their normal routine, and it doesn't even have to be a farm store. It could be just a farm,
Yeah.
you know, or an office building or any of those things. So hopefully the way we approach any development is with high regard for what already exists there and minimizing the impact, not just with the intent of building on land. So
Yeah, that makes sense, you know. I don't come down here a lot, so, you know, it's new to me, but, you know, you're right, it's a general kind of theme that kind of runs across every type of development.
Yep, and every time it's happened, in my experience, there are a lot of concerns by people.
But to keep somebody, you know, happy in a way, you know, there's certain things where, you know, you want to have certain rules there that are set up that, you know, can put somebody's mind at ease, so that they're not always guessing, or they're not always thinking, well, what's going to happen tomorrow, you know? I don't know what the rules are, there seems to be no limits for things like that. So if there are concerns, I'm thinking, and there is a way, like sometimes it is always a gray area, right?
Yeah.
And it's always some kind of negotiation, but maybe there was a basic blueprint. Fill in some of the blanks.
We actually did have an issue that came up this year with the spreading of the biosolids, which is the first time we've had biosolids spread in town. And I had quite a few calls about that, complaining about the odors related to that particular product, which is used throughout the country, but in more rural areas typically. And it was used this year in Granby and caused some complaints. And you know, it's an important issue because we don't want people turned off to farming. And if this is the type of thing where we start to get complaints, then that's how regulation comes about. And that's what can move farmers to say, hey, maybe we should be in southeastern Connecticut or somewhere else operating where they have less regulations. And so I think there is a balance there, and we need to continually think about it because we don't want to turn the residents off to something that is so important like farming. And in fact, we've had conversations with the farmers about biosolids and talked about the best ways to apply them rather than what they did this year. And I think if they do use the product next year, it'll be a completely different situation than we had this year. So, yeah, it is an important topic to think about.
How many, what would you call sizable farms are there in town? I don't know who owns the land sometimes, so it's...
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can go into it right now, but what I could do is, if you give me a call in the office, I'm Fran Armentano,
Yeah.
I could direct you to the website, and you could actually see all the farms, see who owns them, and see the size of them. We have a large number of farms, and they all do different things. And when we talk about sizes of farms, we have farms that are 5 acres but are doing a lot more than some farms that are 100 acres because they're intensifying their operation. Maybe they're raising cattle or sheep or horses, or maybe they're actually raising crops. So it's a real hard question to answer.
And some of the land that folks have, that's farmland that they don't actually farm, but the other farmers do for silage and so forth. So it may not be an actual working farm, but the land that you have is available for the farmer to grow hay, silage or corn.
And farming has changed. I think we had 5 dairy farms when I first came here. I think there are 2 now. But those properties that were dairy farms, I don't think any of them have really developed. Most of them have been preserved or are continuing to farm. They're just not farming, they're just not raising dairy cows.
Some of the farms have been there for many, many, many years, and they were much larger originally.
Yeah.
They sold the fringes off to development to stay alive, and
I'm living in a plot now that's part of was a big orchard at one time. It's huge, so. And you can walk through the woods and find the old stone walls and everything, so.
Fran, I also live close to the vineyard.
Yeah.
And I think they've done a great job. I mean, we haven't had any problems with the vineyard at all. And just want everyone to know that there are some neighbors around there that are very happy with the vineyard and what's taking place there. And also the community effort. You know, we see a lot of community events there. You know, excuse me, the Pony Club, you know, and some other events that happen there that are just charity events. We also know that our property is right across from the vineyard, was part of the dumping site from the old
I'll agree with that, too.
from the old
I
orchard
think-
too, because we find broken bottles and, you know, farm implements and everything else. You know, also have experience, I lived in Colorado for a while, and if anybody's familiar with Greeley, Colorado, you know, just outside of town, there was a Montford, you know, feedlot. And when the wind when the wind blew the wrong way, you knew where the feedlot was. So after people in the town got tired of smelling the odor, they got together and they passed a bill to move the feedlot, you know, which cost them a couple dollars. But still, if the wind's blowing the wrong way, you still smell it. You know, there's also cases where you can see where you got signs where, you know, development is growing up around farms. People don't like the smells. They don't like the noises from the animals. You know, a couple examples of some humorous signs that people put up about some of the outdoor sightings that they didn't like to see either. So, you know, they said if you don't like it here, the farm was here first. You know?
I think that if we're going to preserve farms, we're going to do a lot of things. There's a lot of compromise that people have to understand and recognize in regards to the vineyard. That's part of this whole diversity of uses. And I think communities that are going to be successful in the future, and the times they are changing as far as communities go. There's a lot happening out there. This commission, subcommittee has been discussing that. We really need to look at diversity of uses for farms, for communities to be successful. And there are some communities out there that aren't going to be successful over the next 10 years of everything that the way our society is moving. And what this subcommittee has been looking at is what does it take to make Granby successful, keep Granby successful. And we have so much going for us here, and we want to continue moving in those directions. And I think diversity of uses, including the preservation of farms and the usage of farms, is an important topic that we're talking about. Thank you for that.
Streets, sidewalks, that topic. How about a traffic light in front of Salmon Brook Park?
Well, under traffic, that's a very appropriate topic. The town has looked at that. I think that this committee could look at it and make a recommendation there. The town has talked about a second entrance to Salmon Brook Park. We actually had a study done by a traffic engineer looking at this issue, and we understand that there are certain times of day at Sanford Park when all those activities end at the same time. There's a tremendous amount of pressure put on that one point. And I know the town manager continues to look at opportunities to get either a second entrance or to have a light there. And so,
Plus, there's when you're creeping out from the park onto 10, there's a power pole on the left-hand side that clearly obscures your view up the street there. I'm surprised nobody's been killed in all the years because the traffic is moving along there.
Yeah. That's a concern that's mentioned. As a matter of fact, in the existing plan, I believe it says on page 17 of the existing plan, establish a second entrance to Salmon Brook Park. So that's one of the things that hasn't been accomplished over the last 10 years, but in 2005, that was recognized as an issue, the one entrance and the lack of traffic control at Salmon Brook Park, and it was recommended there. I think it will be addressed again by this subcommittee. Good point.
Fred, do we need state approvals to put a signal there?
Yes. We couldn't just put it in there. We would need a state approval to do that.
It'll take how many years?
Well, let's see, we got approval for Floydville Road for traffic light there, and the last I heard, they were looking at 2017 for the actual placement, so.
Well, why does it take so long?
It's the state of Connecticut, and
DOT needs to give approval. We've asked for.
yeah, they gave us the
light.
approval.
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
the levels there, but
It's-
we've asked for a light at Sandbrook Park, and all we were able to put in was what's there now.
It's just bureaucracy?
No, in that particular case, at Sandbrook Park, and I'm sorry, I moved over to Floydville, and they did agree that the warrants, they met the warrants for a traffic light there. How many accidents, what the amount of traffic is, the sight lines, and so at Floydville Road, we've met the warrants, they've agreed to put it in, which is how long it's gonna take, and that's going back to Paul's comment. Now, in regards to Sandbrook Park, we have not met the warrants. The amount of traffic, accident history, the state has said, no, they didn't think it was necessary to put a light there.
So you have to have a number of accidents before they actually say,
You
hey,
have to have criteria.
Don't get any ideas.
I wouldn't say it that way. It's criteria, not
okay.
number of accidents.
That's just one of the criteria.
Fran, I would say one of the, we've talked about intersections, but, you know, Sandbrook Park's one that I also would agree with what was said. I think there may be something in the plan in that intersection, others that can be done absent state act, whether it's moving a telephone pole, CLMP, or whoever owns the pole, looking at broadening the entrance, some line of sight distances, because as Fran said, there are several intersections in town that have concerns, both from the traffic engineer and just as us just citizens driving around. You know, I could probably name off 5 or 6 off my head really quickly. And you know, most of them have to deal with state roads, and I think if we have to wait for the state to come and fix all of them, it'll be a long time. However, we may be able to do some actions as a town to mitigate some of that, and I think that's part of what the plan looks at as far as the town activity.
Like asking the CLMP to relocate that telephone pole.
I think I would ask, is that something that may be possible, easier than, I have to look at Fran with you as far as the town, you know, is that something that they would look at?
It's certainly something that we could pursue, and if in fact it was necessary, it was restricting the sight line to get them to do that.
So my other favorite intersection, while we're on intersections, when the state redid the intersection at 10202, people coming out of North Granby on Route 20, anybody who decides to make a left-hand turn on 10 blows that whole intersection out. And why did the state not put a left-hand turn arrow there? I understand maybe there was a width concern. A dedicated left turn lane would have been ideal, but at least a left-hand turn arrow that, when it cycles, gives some cars a chance to move out of the way before the oncoming traffic headed across 10202 from 20.
Yeah.
Is it in progress?
Is it?
Well, let me say, first of all, you make a very valid point. I always like to throw in, let's say it's not a car, it's a tractor trailer truck that's going to try to go north.
Because they did, when they redid that many years ago, I've been in town a long time, they did a great job rehabbing the intersection, but they missed the boat on
Yeah,
that piece.
They really need to redesign that portion. When I got here, it was like that, and always questioned that.
So is there
Now,
any-
we've gone through a process and the DOT has agreed to study the intersection, and funding is in place for a study of the center intersections and to do redesign. And I contact them regularly to see where they are, and this process has been going on way longer than you want to imagine, and we don't get anything. So we'll continue to push the state to move on that, and they say wonderful things about how they're moving on this, and they recognize this is a real concern, and they're going to do something there. But I have yet to see a plan. I've actually seen plans of other intersections which come out of nowhere. But the center, I don't get a design, and they are working on it. We'll continue to push them to do something. There are some fairly basic things you could do to improve that intersection.
Agreed.
But because it's completely state operated and run, we don't have a lot of say there. But money has been allocated through the Capital Region Council of Governments, through the DOT to do this. just hasn't been done yet, so.
And we let our state legislatures know that as well, but it wouldn't hurt if others kind of join that bandwagon and kind of ask for assistance as well. It does help.
That's my pet peeve too, Eric. It's a tough one.
Well, listen, everybody can complain, but if the committee doesn't stand up and say, this is
what we
a
want to
high
see
priority
happen."
to change
Yep.
in the value of this community, why would the state say it's important?
Correct.
So that's, it has to come out of whatever goes on in this plan of development to say that, to have a thriving, intersection there with part of the town center, we need to do that, and we probably need to take some land to do that, and so either we say it or we don't, and they would have more act on that, I think.
You're absolutely right. I'm currently working on a grant application to the state, and one of the things that they say in the grant is, what does your plan of conservation and development say? So the state recognizes that towns have plans of conservation and development, and they seem interested in what they say. So this plan comes down pretty hard and makes some specific recommendations and recognizes the importance of this area. I think we can point to that and maybe get some more traction from the state.
And there's always been a frustration with the amount of traffic in town, but at least I certainly personally do not want to see 4 lanes of all of it. But if at least what's there could be moved efficiently, and that's what that left-hand turn would help.
And what it also does is tractor trailer trucks, at least the ones that go through there regularly, they don't want to go through that intersection because they can't make that left-hand turn. So what do? They find other ways to get around town instead of going the way they should. And that causes issues, as you can imagine. So we can solve some of those issues if we can improve the center intersection. So really
Would
is a
that be
priority.
valuable to state explicitly?
Pardon?
Would that be valuable to state explicitly?
Or
is that not an argument that the state would?
No, I think it's valuable, and we've mentioned that, and it's we will continue to, but I think it is one of the things that could be concerns, at least the state people in the DOT they were talking to. It's a matter of getting them to prioritize this and move forward. And I think, again, as Eric said, or as Ben said, that one of the ways to do that is to make it a point in the plan of conservation and development.
I realize it's kind of a chicken or an egg thing if they haven't designed it, but are there right-of-way issues there?
I personally would think that there are some land that you'd have to take to make the intersection function effectively. But it's the state of Connecticut. I mean, they can do that, and they have done that. And as long as it makes sense, I think that the community would support it.
Anybody have any other intersections they don't like and would like to see fixed? I mean, there's nothing stopping us from putting in our plan of development that here are the intersections we've identified in which the state has an interest in, which we think are not functioning very well.
I can think of two because I live out in West Granby, where Simsbury Road comes into Route 20.
Absolutely.
Isn't that crazy?
Very dangerous. My wife won't even go that way.
No, I go Day Street.
She'll take a right down toward the post office and then make a left where she has good vision. Another one is at the intersection of Barndar Hills Road and Route 20, because that one house is so close to the road when people are coming north from Barndar Hills to go across to Bushy Hill. They have to creep way out.
So it's not just their house, it's a fence.
And
it's overgrown
The whole thing.
overgrown bushes.
And the grade, the state road's higher than the town road.
Well, not just that, people come from Route 20
Comes down 50 miles
west.
an hour.
They're coming 70 miles an
So
hour down that road.
in my time on Barn Door, I think Lifestar, 2, yes, I think 3 have landed in the field next to my house because of an accident at that
Right.
intersection. Now, we talk about accidents and potential fatalities. There's documentation there, clearly.
Some years ago, the state actually took that road down somewhat, as I remember. There used to be a larger bump in it, And they flatten it out so you can have a better sight line, because cars coming down the hill, coming east, would go into this dip. And the cars that were at the intersection couldn't see them, and they'd come flying over the hill there at St. Teresa. So I believe that's quite a long time ago that they flattened it out. But it's still very dangerous.
But the speed is people mentioned is a good part of that.
But that fence, isn't that within the right-of-way? There's no, to me, just getting rid of that fence would be a huge help, that you wouldn't have to be out in the road. I was out in the road today where I went this afternoon, and this big, but I didn't see him until I got my nose out, this big, they see you and they kind of go around you, and I was in a safe, but it still gives you this terrible feeling.
You can go on the GIS site and you can take a look and see where that
Yeah.
fence is in relation.
It would be
to the property
interesting to
line.
see, 'cause
We'll do
that's,
that.
Well, it's worse coming out of Bushy Hill when the house on the left was for sale. And they had the for sale sign right in front of the fence, and you couldn't see, I mean, your nose of your car was out on Route 20. So, you make
Those are the
a
kind of
couple
things we
phone calls
can
and
do
they took
something
the
about.
thing down.
Yeah, something like that.
you can fix.
Ring the realtor and.
Right. Yeah, I did, yeah, I took it down, but still, that's a terrible.
Has anyone looked at the East Street, Notch Road, 1022, that 5 there again, or no?
corner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's been accidents there like every week. I mean,
There's a plan for that.
There is a
There's a
plan.
plan for that. As a matter of fact, the latest plan I saw from the state is a roundabout, which would be an interesting approach to that intersection. And it's been completely drawn up, and it's just a matter of whether or not they're going to move forward with that or not. And the state has moved in the direction of roundabouts. They've been pretty successful where they've put them in, and it's kind of an interesting idea. And keep your ears open. We'll see if it moves forward or not.
Yeah, it's crazy. I have 2 young boys that just got their license and going up there, they're afraid to come through. They they're looking and looking, and I'm like, you just gotta go. You can't hesitate.
Well, we met with
It's
the
tough.
state on that, and it's interesting because there's not a lot of, it doesn't meet the criteria.
Yes.
It does not meet the criteria. We went through that, does not meet the criteria. But they all agreed that it's a very uncomfortable intersection.
It is.
Because it's wide, and you've got so much going on between across the street, the amount of cars that are going fast, and you just look one way, and you're ready to go, and then you look, all of a sudden the next car comes over the hill. So it's a very uncomfortable intersection, and that's what causes the accidents. And so they are willing to do something there. They will not put up a regular standard traffic light. It doesn't meet the warrants. They say, well, we won't put up a standard traffic light. But they seem like they will do the roundabout, which will slow everybody down to a reasonable speed to kind of move around it. And there's a fascinating presentation, and again, I think that will move forward. Being the state, it may take a while, but it is in discussion.
We have our first experience with the roundabout this summer that was very, very controversial. Everybody thought everything was just awful about it. Well, it is great. You come in, they've got bike lanes around that work, and you come in and you look, and when there's nobody there, you go, and it goes very smoothly. It's not like these great big rotaries where you think you're going to get killed. I was very, very impressed with the results.
They actually work better than any other method for controlling intersections like that. When you put four-way stop sign in, it's dangerous because we all know that people don't pay any attention to stop signs anymore. When you put lights in, it slows down the traffic or stops the traffic. When you put a roundabout in and it's correctly designed for the amount of traffic they expect to have at peak hours, it slows the traffic down, but it doesn't back it up. You get on and you get off. It's a proven method of traffic control everywhere in what should I say, the sophisticated world, with the exception of the United States. Everybody else uses them, and they find that they work out very well.
And you're right, it's
the
gonna
United
slow down
States is
people,
very
which will be
slow
nice
into
there.
moving in that direction, but once you figure out how to get on, the good thing about it is if you miss your get off, you can just go around it.
The other obvious one is Day Street 189.
Yes.
Day Street 189.
Yep.
Oh, coming down.
Especially
Fix
if
two
you
people.
don't fix the Route 20 where would take the 18-wheel traffic off of Day Street. I can't imagine how they come out hard. But
You got to practice for 30 or so years.
You do. And they're big, everybody stops.
Yeah, that's a
That's,
That was one of the photos, as a matter of fact, that you recognized that I had there. That was a Day Street intersection. Even the Wells Road 189 intersection, because it's not a 90, people enter Wells Road way faster than they should. And so by putting that on a 90, I think it would prevent some of the problems we have there. There's probably a dozen of them that we will have in the plan by the time we're done. And some of them are fairly easy fixes. So it's just a matter of identifying them.
I probably shouldn't say this, but I guess I will. I knew some guys in the State Traffic Commission who deal with this kind of issue, and I asked them once how come it always took so long to get everything done. And he made 2 points. He said, you got 169 towns, and every single one of them, you have maybe between 5 and 10 intersections or something that needs fixing. He said they would love to just fix them all in 1 year. He said if you want that to happen, you're going to need about 30% of the voters in the state to write their legislatures and say, please adequately fund the Department of Transportation and hire more engineers so that they can do the work. And he said it's often just a matter, he didn't say that they weren't bureaucratically inept now and then, but he did say that they just don't have the number of people that they're supposed to have to carry out their mission. So he invited me to write, Bill Szymanski, Kevin Whitkos, and John Kissel. So that's part of the answer right there. We got a state government that's in budgetary trouble, and it's hard for them to justify going out and hiring 145 engineers. So
one of the other issues, like what Eric was saying, is that transportation infrastructure is one of the first things that gets cut out of a budget if you need to make budget cuts. And that's not unique to Connecticut. That's unique to the whole United States. That's one of the first things to go, because things don't get really bad in a hurry. Roads can start falling apart, and it takes them a long time, and eventually they do get to the point where they have to do something. Before you can live with traffic situations and bad roads for a long, long time before you have to fix it. That's part of the problem, that it doesn't get the attention that it needs to. Never has, and probably never will.
It's interesting. If you had asked me before this meeting what the major topic would have been, I would not have guessed transportation. I probably would have started with commercial and industrial development and then moved on to open space and recreation. So I'm going to throw out commercial and industrial development. I'd really like to see what people's feelings are with that whole topic. We don't have a lot of such development in town. 10 years ago, it was completely different industry. And 10 years before that, it was even more different. Today, with internet sales, with home offices, the whole idea of commercial industrial development is a different thing. We try to maintain the center as a strong, viable center with great restaurants. One of the things we've been talking about as a subcommittee is keeping the center strong, putting more housing around the center, because that seems to be what people are looking for today. As baby boomers are getting older, the young people are not looking necessarily for suburban towns. They want areas where things are happening, and so we're really looking at what we can do in the center to create more, make it more vibrant and put more restaurants and other things there. So, do you have anybody's thoughts on commercial industrial development at this point?
I had a question. What's happening with the Old Oak Tavern? Because I saw that was...
Well, the Old Oak Tavern, the owner is making some repairs there now. It's up on the market. She's attempting to sell it. And she felt that it would sell more quickly if, in fact, some repairs were done first. And so those repairs are ongoing right now, but there is no proposal that I've seen to reopen it as a restaurant at this moment, so there may be some interest.
Okay, yeah, there's no, okay, so it might go away. But probably going to be some other commercial thing, right?
I would imagine that's a great location. I think it makes a great restaurant there. If you would ask me my opinion, I would think that another restaurant will establish itself there. But it's just a matter of getting the right person to come in and say, yes, we're willing to do that. You've seen great success in the center with Han, that has brought lots of people in from areas. So I think it's been demonstrated that if you have the right restaurant and the right product, people will in fact go to restaurants in the center. And we've got other restaurants in the center, the Mexican restaurant, and ABC's been there for 30 years. I mean, restaurants survive. The bagel, Lock, Stock, and Bagel does very, very well. So we've got restaurants that are very successful in the center, and I think we can support more restaurants. It's just a matter of the right product and the right location.
But it does seem also that there's a lot of turnover of those shops downtown. Like in the last 10 years, it's like I don't get into town much, so every time I come in, it's like something's gone.
Retail development is a tricky business today. The competition is fierce, and I don't know if you buy things online, but I'm going to guess that everybody in this building buys things online. And when you can buy things online so much cheaper, perhaps with a greater variety, that's what people are doing. And so it's very difficult to be successful in a retail environment today.
Tougher than in the past.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now things like supermarkets can be successful because you can't really sell food too effectively online, but retailing is a tough business today.
Have you had any concerns yet because of traffic now in the center, like with Hans on a weekend, and Friday, Saturday night with Starbucks on? There's no parking in there. I mean, you have to park, around the corner, and if a restaurant does come into where Old Oak, you're going to be, out of spaces,
My quick answer is no, I'm not concerned, because if you can't find a place to park, well, that means something good is going on.
No,
People will
you're
find
right.
a place to park and they'll walk, and they can park
In Geisler's.
There are places to park, just how far are you willing to work?
Yeah.
One of the problems with Han is that you've got this pickup business where, your takeout business, and so now you've got those people who, they're not going to park at Geisler's.
No, they park right in front.
Exactly. So there's got to be a way to work on the business, where the takeout business, where you're going to take out, and the people who are going to park. My wife and I were there on Saturday, and the parking lot was full. Yeah,
Yes.
I didn't have that many people in it.
No, I
Jace didn't have that many people in it. And so I was like, where are these people? So I really have to investigate that. I don't know if people are parking there and, say, hey, let's meet there, and leaving their car there and going elsewhere, or what, because there are way more cars in that parking lot than I would have guessed should have.
Well, that's what I've been seeing a lot of. We'll go out to eat or something, and I'm like, well, where are all these people? Where are they?
Yeah.
The parking lot is chock full, and there's no parking.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. If they're going to leave the car somewhere, there's better parking lots to choose than that one. So,
But it's nice having that in restaurants.
yes.
One of the things that our town needs, and in my opinion, we are sorely lacking, and it's because all of my friends as they age leave town. They can't stay here because there's no place for them in a elder, not an elder care facility in the sense of a Meadowbrook, but just a place to live where they don't want to maintain their home anymore, et cetera, and there are some services available. It's a major undertaking. And that's not a small moment. It's not like opening an art shop or something. And that I would think would be just a terrific addition to the quality of life in our town, because people go to Seabury, Doncaster, those are fairly expensive places to go to. Okay, so if you can afford it, fine, but you're still leaving Granby. You may not want to. You can go to the American Inn, which is up in Southwick, which, I have so many friends that I know that live there, and there. And it's not going to be too long before I'm going to be looking for one of those places. I don't want to stay in Granby.
You're absolutely right, because we have the 50-plus housing, we have the nursing home, we have elderly housing, but we don't have what I'll call maybe an assisted living type of facility. And it is what we're lacking, and we have areas where we could put one. It's just a matter of having the right person come in willing to do that. And maybe we've got to find a way to encourage that more, because I do think we're losing residents who would like to stay in town. We just can't find the facility to do that. So it's a big mistake.
Stuff I was going to talk to you about, Dave, and I never got back to you. Where I said I wanted to talk to you about something that I was going to.
Well, you know, it's interesting because like my mom, God bless her, is 96, and she lives up in Albany. I forced her to move from her home about 6 years ago now. And she moved to a place called Beltrone Living Center. Well, it's a high-rise. It's 10 stories. But it's fabulous. And this is not assisted living, you know, as per se. She just has an apartment, and they serve meals downstairs, which you can get, and they have a hair shop there, and they got a physical therapist in the building. They got all these services that people as they age need. They have van service to doctor's appointments for a buck, and vans to the grocery market and all the rest. So I am so lucky. I am so lucky that I have peace of mind, and there are, you know, people there that will, I can hire an aide for $12 an hour to go see her 3 times a week. And I have peace of mind because I know she's being looked after.
That's really transitional living. It's not, it is assisted, it can be, but it really, I think you'd probably call it transitional living, which is something we definitely don't have.
Certainly that's I mean, McLean has moved a lot in that direction, and I guess, and Fran, you may know more, but I'm guessing that they have some significant plans to keep going in that direction. It's not in Granby, but I would guess, I know quite a few people who have lost their mate, for instance, and then they go to there where they're still independent, but they have services available when they want them. But it's growing. They've built a lot over there.
And there are other places in the region. It's just that I'm selfish. I want to stay here.
It would be nice to have one come in Granby.
And I think statistically, if you look at the numbers, the average age in Granby is now 40, 45, and you know, we're all moving up in age, and I think we're going to need those types of facilities.
Not till we're ready, Fran.
What's that?
Not till we're We're going to be more mobile, more active, healthier.
Fran, in terms of our plan, though, if we have that project ready to go today in Granby, what kind of zoning do you need? Is our zoning code contemplate you doing that in a commercial zone, or do you need a high-density residential zone? Or?
There are locations in our zones where you could do that type of thing, but I think we should investigate that as part of our studies with this subcommittee to know exactly where it is possible and maybe recommend that a zone be broadened so that you can do that.
In my past life, I've represented folks who built those, and that usually was the challenge, is that because the way you describe them, they don't fit right in any particular zone, because they have some commercial aspect to them, they have some high-density aspect to them, and so I think it is something that we should look at.
Yeah, because the cost of trying to create a zone or create an amendment or to land a zone where you can do it is enough to say, well, why spend our money there? We'll move somewhere else. And I think if you had regulation in place, it would encourage someone to do that. So
Our transitional zone, Fran, we talked about that when that was developed. Across from Stop and Shop. That
in the
would be a
economic
good
development
place.
zone, it's certainly permitted.
Something like that.
We probably should look at some other areas too to see if we can't, if we thought it was appropriate in those locations, then to at least provide the opportunity.
Is there anything up near Meadowbrook in that area? There was some land for sale, because I mean, we're looking at that.
I'd want to look at the map and look at the floodplain before I comment.
You've got to have sewer.
Sewer and water. It's close, it's pretty close. But there may be other areas also.
Fran, you mentioned some assisted type living, you mentioned Center Life and small restaurants and small retail, but you've not discussed big box commercial. So you mentioned commercial, and I've lived in town a long time. It has been my opinion, and I think the stereotype of this town, that we are resistant to big box commercial. Just that, I don't think the previous, that if you ask most of the people in town, if does Granby embrace big box commercial, they'd say no. Not a reflection on anybody in this room, but that's just a general stereotype that I think exists. I know that before Stop and Shop went in that property, I think that there was another big box retailer who was considering going in there that might have been turned down. I don't
Never
remember.
turned down. Walmart.
It was never turned down.
Never even came before
Never even
planning and
filed an
zoning.
application.
They went and talked to the selectmen.
But had they gone forward, would they have been embraced? Would a Walmart have been embraced? Would a Home Depot down by State Line Oil be embraced? Would we let it come into town? I would say we should.
Yeah.
You know, I saw the tax numbers there. Stop and Shop pays $7-8 million in taxes. I could imagine what one of them would pay in taxes. It would certainly help ease the load. Would we embrace it?
Well, let me clarify a couple things. You can bring up a great point, and I have this discussion with people all the time. Walmart was actually not looking at the Stop and Shop site. They were looking at the site where Humpland is.
Agreed. No, I know there's a lot of misunderstanding around where they were.
And that was zoned residential. And so they would have needed a zone change, which is a very expensive process and a risky process to go through. And so Walmart was trying to get feedback as to whether or not they should spend their money pursuing a zone change.
Sure.
And based on their feedback, they decided not to spend their money, and they went away. Actually, what happened through that process was it sent a message to Stop and Shop that said, hey, you know what, this is Walmart wanted to open a super Walmart, which would have been a grocery store.
Right.
Maybe we should be in Granby. And Stevens Chevrolet, which was zoned residential, somehow there was some connection there, and they negotiated a deal to buy the Stevens Chevrolet property, and that's where the Stop and Shop went with the TJ Maxx. Now, one of the things maybe we learned from that is that Stop and Shop and TJ Maxx, which isn't all that different from super Walmart, we got a grocery store and a retailer, didn't create the problems that we heard. We had 10 hours of public hearing before the Stop and Shop was approved. And it's 10 hours of public hearing, and some of the things that were said there were fairly interesting, none of which came true. And so I think any development, and I'm not just I'm in favor of anything or against anything, but you need to look at the site, at the traffic, at the impact on the community, and make a decision based on those things. And our Planning and Zoning Commission has a pretty strong history of making good decisions based on what's being proposed. So, you know, you mentioned a couple of interesting stores, and we may see that in the future. I can't tell you that I've ever been approached by any of those particular stores.
Because there's not any close.
No.
And I think that's the difference. With Stop and Shop, you're serving the local community.
Right.
If you put in a Home Depot or something like that, you're going to be pulling people in from the surrounding area, and then you've got traffic issues.
Sure.
So the siting becomes a little more.
But I guess, again, my general question as part of your plan, you know, will we be open, receptive, soliciting? You know, a lot of towns are out there drumming, you know, beating the drum, come, come, come. Are we going to have that in our plan or no? And if somebody were to approach us, would we embrace it, shut it down, move forward? I mean, what's our goal there?
If I can
So I
say-
can't answer the second first part because you, well, go ahead.
The Walmart that wanted to come in was a 165,000 square foot store. And with that, I don't think that Stop and Shop plus TJ Maxx matches that. And I think at the time, we really needed a Hunt Glen. We didn't need this store that was going to attract, I think they were estimating like 10,000 people a day were going to pass through there. At the time, that was more than we had in town, number of people. I was one that was very much against it. And I don't believe that, or I think there was more negative with that than what we have right now. I don't think that there's any comparison compared to what Stop and Shop and TJ Maxx pulling it out of there every day. I don't think it was going to give us a lot of employment, and I think that because it was going to draw in from such a big area around us and be such a high volume store, I think we did the right thing. And I think if you were to go out to the town right now and the community, that they would still say no.
it's possible. I think you get a mixed view on it, just like
Well,
any diverse population.
I've never seen a town meeting attended like the one at the high school when Walmart presented that.
Your basic question, though, is an interesting one, and I think we've talked a little bit about it in the commercial subcommittee, and that is, looking ahead 10 years in our financial planning, and I know that for selectmen is there, what do we see that's a need for this community? Are we looking at a need to raise significantly more dollars than we normally do, which leads to what you had said, is to do that, you establish more taxable property because that raises most of our taxes. I don't think we know, at least in the committee that's been discussing, we don't have a good feel for that right now. I think Fran was going to try to come up with some financial planning information, but we all hear that school attendance is going to be going down. So do you say from that we have less cost in the schools, therefore we maybe don't have a need to raise the tax base significantly, or not? I don't know the answer, but it's a question that needs to be addressed through this plan.
That's right.
Say if you got a need, and if you don't have a need, don't worry about it, but if you do, think about it and put something down on paper.
Again, not here to discuss pros and cons of anything. I just think the town should be ready for when the person comes and asks. Because inevitably someone will ask.
I think this is precisely the type of conversation we wanted to have tonight.
Right.
So, this is the thing. I just made some quick notes here. Hunt Glen, which ended up on the space that Walmart at least thought about, is 69 units, $300,000 a unit, let's say. We're talking $21 million project. There's no commercial development that comes close to generating the kind of funds that development does. It doesn't show up as a top 10 taxpayer because they're all individually owned units. But the amount of value there and the amount of tax that they bring into the town is very, very high and very, very significant. So, and I'll say that as far as commercial development goes, to say that we want to bring in commercial development solely for, and you didn't say this, so I'm not putting words in your mouth, but because we want the tax dollars. And I do hear that a lot. I personally don't think that that's how you want to approach commercial development. I think you want to bring it in because it makes sense in the community, it works for the community, because the amount of dollars that it will bring in won't make a difference. Unless you get a development like the Hartford and Simsbury, and of course we see what happened there, you're really not going to bring in any one development that's going to make a significant impact in taxes. There are other things that we've talked about that you need to do in that regard.
Yeah, just to give you a few examples is when you talk about that, we've talked about employment, people who might like to stay in town and work in town, services that could be offered did we have more commercial development, and the things that the community at large would need or would want besides just dollars, because I agree with Fran, you probably won't help yourself that much. So when you think about commercial, think about all the things, all the benefits that it could offer, or which type would offer those and what would be best. And I think more often than not, it tends to, or at least I hear, it pushes you back toward the smaller proprietor-owned kinds of businesses that are part of the community and cater to the needs more than anything. Occasionally you may get the big side, but for this community, I hear, keep it in tune with the community itself.
I think we have to, that this committee and the zoning board and the selectmen, we can't sit here today and say, we're going to come out of this plan and we're going to have this type of transitional living that's going to happen, and we're going to have this type of development. We don't have, or at least maybe somebody in the room does, but I don't have a plan to open up any of this stuff myself. It has to be someone encouraged to come, and we have to have the environment, whether it's by zoning regulation or other process, that either encourages or supports the plan we want to have. And that's what we've been discussing. We've talked housing before, we've talked about the center. What can we do as a town to encourage activity around the plan we want to have? And I think that's important because we can sit here and want to have things, but we're not the ultimate developer or person putting the money up for some of these things. And we have some valuable resources in town now, as Fran showed, which is we have public sewer, we have public water, and natural gas. And those are things that the committee is looking at that's very important of what type of use we'll have for those resources, because they are limited and they only service a certain segment of town. And once something goes in there, it's a commitment for that.
I just had a question, if you're looking, commercial property and stuff, I know it's a small piece of land, but right now I see that the end of East Street's for sale. That property there, that is not zoned commercial, huh?
That's correct, that's zone residential.
It's residential. If they're going to change that intersection there and, do that, it might be a need of something there. I know down the road, there used to be a little mart there, on the corner, and that way, for people that live like I do down that end, something in that area. So has anyone thought about making that commercial?
The answer is yes, we've thought about that. There's some specific issues with that property, not the least of which is drainage.
Oh, that's the field there that.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure whether it was a stagecoach.
Most of Route 10 has great soils with sandy soils. That particular property does not. It's a hard pan soil. And there's no structural drainage in the street, and so it floods and the water sits in there. So one of the issues is drainage. The other thing I'll say about commercial development along the north end of Route 10 is it hasn't seen a lot of success. You're talking about Braddock's, I suspect, which was a patch for then it became a little
grocery store.
Yeah, like a variety store there.
Yeah.
And they didn't find success. And if you look at the amount of vacancies we have there, there's just not a lot of traffic there. I mean, look, they go 10-2 has a lot of traffic. The numbers in that northern portion are not high.
No, because that's what I was wondering, how much traffic comes through there. You do have some people in the mornings coming from Southwick, but is it a lot, Where is it?
It's not a lot to support a retail environment. Now, what we are seeing are some small industrial type buildings for contractors, electrical contractors, plumbing contractors and such. Perhaps that type of business could be supported there, and I think we should discuss it as part of the plan of conservation development, because maybe that type of thing has some possibilities, but again, we have to address what some of the drainage issues. So there may be a use there that's right for that site,
Yeah.
and something that probably should be discussed.
I think we have talked in our committee meetings, there are other areas that may make some sense to have, maybe not the big type retail or anything, but you mentioned you're a resident maybe in the north side of town or west side of Granby, and we have some natural places where you could maybe encourage some small retail to service residents in areas so they don't have to drive into town if they're looking for certain things. Thinking of relieving congestion and reducing how much people have to drive places, or maybe they could bike to someplace. We've heard someone talk about bike lanes and things before, so I think those are going to be looked at where we have a commercial or retail zone. Is there areas, like you said, that maybe make sense to expand it? It's a nice, logical addition to an existing zone, rather than creating something new.
Well, we've talked pretty heavily about the two topics now, so I'm going to go back to recreation and open space. And let me start by saying recreation has been one of the things that I think is very important to Granby residents. I think it's something that the people who move here look for recreational opportunities. You look at the success of the YMCA, of Granby Yoga, of our own recreational programs through the town. I think there are people who are looking for a community where you have a bike trail like we have now right on our border and actually part of Granby where people can bike and rollerblade. So that type of activity has become very, very popular, and I think it's one of the things that helps us sell in town. People want to come to town because of that. And our plan of conservation development does say we should be moving in that direction, promoting recreational lifestyles, recreational activities, and if you have any ideas of anything more that we could do, I heard some talk about creating better bike lanes along our existing roads, and
those are all good ideas.
Where's our golf course, Fran?
Well, that's where,
Used to be on Bar- used to be-
that's where I'm, East
Used to
Street.
be on Barnwell.
And if you made a facility there and had other things besides golf, I think this town would thrive. I think you would find that people, I mean, I want to grow old here. I'm hearing that a lot of other people want to grow old here, and golf is a sport that, is big, and,
Well,
I
it was
don't
well
know.
before my time, but there was a golf course on Barn Door.
There was? Oh, wow.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
As a parent and two young children who
Yes.
just got their licenses, and Fran mentioned the 45, the green property. The average age in Granby is 45.
Yeah.
And going higher.
Yes.
How are we facilitating the folks who are getting older and also drawing the young blood in to be interested in actually supporting the folks who are getting older?
I think honestly, if we're trying to bring in, we need
Young families,
young families.
people
I'm
with
actually, my background is recreation, and I've worked in different facilities and stuff, and I find that right now our children and in this town, they don't have much to do. And that's where we should be looking at some of these open spaces. What are we going to do to bring in the younger population so there's stuff for these kids to do and continue it to adolescent years? Right now, the adolescents in this town, what do they have to do? Golf is a good thing, or if they had, a facility with a pool, or some activities that they could do at night. You could run some different activities inside some of the facilities if it was a facility they could do these things.
Do your sons talk about, or I'm sure no, they don't, because they're not thinking like this, but when they come back around after leaving the nest,
Yes.
and they're in their late 20s, do you see them moving back to Granby or staying in Granby to raise their kids?
Well, they keep telling me they want to build a house on our property, so I don't know the answer. So, and we're very close family, so, they're like, Mom, Dad, can you get that piece of property up there? I'm like, well, we'll see, But you're right, we need to attract the younger, because if we're average 45, it's, we got to attract the younger, and I think adding something into this community that would attract them more. Don't you, some of the people that have kids that are like 12, 13 years old, I hear a lot of people, ice skating, they have to go to Simsbury. Hockey, they go to they go to Enfield. Some of these different activities that are out there, we're always going to Simsbury, Enfield here. If we had a little bit more stuff here, I don't know, that's my feeling, that we need to bring more into the town.
I think any of us who have children, those children said there's nothing to do in Granby.
Exactly.
I was born and raised in Hartford, and as a youth I said there was nothing to do there. I think you just heard of.
Yeah, but when I grew up,
Right.
I remember going to the roller skating rink.
Yeah.
I remember going to all these things, and I just don't see our kids having that.
I don't disagree with you. I think that we need to concentrate on a number of different issues, and one of them is to continuously pay attention of what our youth want to do. But personally, I'm more interested in that age group of out of college, 22 to 35, because those are the ones who are going to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to stay here. And they're going to make the decision if they were here to begin with. And if you look at the success of West Hartford and what they've done with Blueback, and
it's beautiful.
that's an area where I think we need to concentrate our thoughts a little bit on, saying, could we get people interested out of college to live in Granby because they can hike the trails, they can hike McLean's, they can hike the landfill properties, they can jump right on the bike path and go there, they can go to the YMCA. So, make those recreational activities part of what they'd be interested in.
Yeah.
And go to the center and go to some great restaurants and in that area rather than going to the next town over. So we've thrown that out.
And that's what we had talked about at the last session we did, is to have smaller homes and smaller lots, a little more affordable for kids coming out of college with debt on their shoulders that don't want to buy the big house yet. They don't maybe want to have the children quite yet, but they'd like to have their little piece of heaven. And so that's something else that we, I think, have to look at, giving the different kinds of opportunities, housing opportunities in town.
And then they could transition up. They start there, but then they buy my house, and I'm willing to ready to sell because I want to buy their house because I don't want the big yard anymore.
Exactly.
So I think we need to constantly think about those things at this time in our society and the changes that are occurring. So
Fran, I jotted something down along the lines, I heard the open space and things that the town does have today. We have, fortunately, a large, both public with state and town open space, and then the McLean's and the Green Land Trust, among others, in that we do have pretty much a single use for that open space, which is either nothing or hiking. And,
Horseback riding?
well, some, but not all the open space allows that, but I'm thinking biking. I hear people, I wish I could bike on this, and that's another emotional topic in town, kind of like the box store and stuff, but it may be something to consider. We have a resource of open space, can that be used for other recreational purposes that might have a broader interest to other people in town without damaging the character of the open space?
I would agree that the town's definition of recreation is pretty narrow.
Yeah.
Also, there's new property the town has acquired, like the Devontae Farm and some others that I think would be great for like a BMX park, a skateboard park, stuff like that. Is this committee going to be looking at what we're going to do with these assets that we've spent a lot of money to get?
Wait, first, going back to Mark's point, when you say biking, I think certainly the mountain biking today is very popular. A lot of the young people, especially in the early 20s, like that activity. Granby Land Trust doesn't restrict their lands to mountain biking, and so if you want to get out there and bike those properties, people do mountain bike on Mary Edwards property. There are no restrictions to that. I know McLean's does not allow it, but I'm not sure. I don't think the state, there are restrictions on the state properties, but it is something that I think we should look at because that's another thing. People say, hey, we're going to move to Granby, there's recreation activities and there's some good mountain biking that we can do. You mentioned the BMX, which again is non-motorized. It's now an Olympic sport.
Is it non-motorized?
Yeah, BMX is not.
Anything with a motor brings a whole different dynamic to it. I support, motorized use of, stuff as well, but I know that's probably the third rail in this town, so.
Well, let's not go there for a second, though. The BMX is huge. I've had people in my office asking about a BMX track.
Cyclocross, BMX.
Yep, it's very,
both
very
Olympic
popular.
sports now.
Great recreation activity. It's physical. Again, it's an Olympic sport now, and there are towns who have created tracks, and they've been very successful. There are groups that travel around to that, but we've got a group that's looking at, or a group is being formed to look at town properties, and maybe that's one of the things they might consider.
I think that would be a huge success on a big piece.
It's a really interesting idea.
So what is this? Explain to me.
So BMX is basically, it's a bicycle.
Oh,
It used to be mountain, it's what...
like a mountain bike?
Yeah, it's like a mountain bike. It used to be what
It's like
Where you really work?
Oh, yeah, you jump, there's jumps and everything.
Yeah, so it's cross-country, horseback, kind
It's like being on a horse, only you're pedaling.
Yeah.
There's actually a really nice one in Torrington, if you ever want to take a
The
ride.
horse you don't
see
have
what
to
it is.
feed.
There's a really nice one in Torrington.
And then the most recent and newest Olympic edition is called cyclocross, which is a hybrid between road racing and off-road racing for bicycles. So the bicycles are not road bikes, but they're not BMX bikes, and it's a very fast sport and very competitive.
So, and I think, we're moving so fast in types of recreational activities today, I think that we should be looking at more of those things for youth. And you look at the skateboarders, and they're in their 20s, performing these races.
Well, that's exactly, something that they'll do older.
So those are all great thoughts.
So in high school, all I did was climbing in Connecticut, driving around and stuff. And then, but surprisingly, there's one cliff like up at Broad Hill that's very
Diamond
good.
Ledge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's excellent.
really nice.
And it'd be kind of interesting to promote that as an area people can climb. And I'm sure people who moved into this town and are living here that don't know that there's an excellent piece of rock that you can go climb on, which is allowed by the Greenwood Land Trust that owns the property.
Where's that?
On Broad Hill.
Towards Broad Hill.
Behind it.
Credibility, you threw it away.
Oh,
Yeah, so it runs, it's right off of Simsbury Road. Promote, again, as a recreational community, the greater the variety of recreation activities you promote, the more people you'll attract.
I think that's what families look for now. They're really into the fitness and recreation and stuff like that, and when they go to look for houses and buy them, and you've probably seen this, what they're asking for, what's going on in town, what recreation is available to me and my family.
We haven't, you know, it's natural to use all the trails we have for cross-country skiing. But I don't hear anybody talking about it. Am I just closed off somewhere? I don't hear that being really big and attractive sport. But you hear people say, I think I'll do that, but I don't see anybody do. You know, the one center that was up in East Hartford, you don't want jerk.
You gotta go over to Holcomb Farm or McLean's when it snows. Go on the Barn Door Hills entrance and you will see people cross-country skiing and snowshoeing. Both
Okay.
ways.
There's maybe what, a couple dozen? I mean, I'm just asking, is it a big? Okay,
Sometimes on Route 10, you can't find a parking. That's why you go to Barn Door Hills.
okay.
On Route 10, you can't find a front of people. You get a good snowfall, number of people coming out, mostly cross-country skiing. But those trails are like old road trails, they're fairly reasonable.
Yeah.
You know, so some of the other trails in Granby to cross-country ski on are pretty tough. And so that's where you see people like these snow.
There's a large place in Granville at the Maple Corner Farm.
Oh, yeah.
They have trails.
Oh, that's right.
But Jim, we had the small snowshoers that we did a midnight snowshoe hike out of Holcomb. There was a lot of.
That's what I was wondering. It was really.
So, but another good point about the types of recreation activities we could be promoting through our Flint Conservation Development.
Does anybody have any ideas or comments that they came here intending to make and have found they didn't get the opportunity? I don't, you know, we don't want to close up and go home and have somebody say, geez, they want to maybe something. No? Okay, great.
We'll do it again, and this is really very, very helpful for us. Appreciate your comment.
And the goal is to have a plan written for just before the spring, and then that'll be available. We'll put it online, people can read it, and hopefully comment on it. It has to go in front of the Board of Selectmen for approval. It has to be approved by the state, and so it's a bit of a process to get it approved. But first, you got to get it written, and I think we're making progress. So, if you have any questions or comments during the process, you hear anything, feel free to call my office or submit an email or a note to Paul. I should say Paul and Eric, since you're co-members, chair people, so.
Great, well, thank you very much for coming, and it was, I think, very productive and interesting evening and conversation. Thank you for all of your